Welcome, Wildcats, to another episode of Weber State Weekly. This is our football show, and we're a member of the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host. I'm a man who once witnessed a man lose a backyard boxing match in 6 seconds flat, Colby Peterson. On the show today, we got a man who hasn't seen anyone lose this badly since Dan Henderson knocked out Michael Bisping, John King.
If you haven't ever seen it before and you're a boxing or a UFC fan, I highly suggest going to YouTube after the show ends. Don't do it right now, but go to YouTube, type in Dan Henderson knocks out Michael Bisping, and just bask in its glory. It's the best knockout that I've ever seen in the history of combat sports. It's even better because, back in the day, I used to be a huge fan of the reality show, The Ultimate Fighter, which was how people qualified to get on to get contracts with the UFC. And, the whole lead up to UFC 100 was Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping going back and forth because they were the coaches on the Ultimate Fighter. And as is tradition, the coaches always fight at the end of the season. And Michael Bisping has said some some nasty things about Dan Henderson's wife and all these things. So going into the fight, I was definitely Team Henderson, and that was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had watching sports in my entire life.
And keep in mind, a couple of John's teams have won championships, so that's saying something.
Yes, it is.
All right, on today's show, we got a game recap for you folks. We're going to wrap up the Beehive Bowl, last one for what could be a while. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Weber State drubbing of Southern Utah down in Cedar City over the weekend. And then I've got a game for John. We're playing Fact or Whack. I've got some facts, maybe not facts. We'll have to see. Prepared for John King. Let's see if he can smell a rat. So before we get into that, I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can also see these videos on YouTube. So subscribe to any of those places where you want to get Weber State Weekly content. We're also on social media. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Twitter is one of the best places to hit us on, especially on game day. Hoops is getting started. We played Duquesne tonight, won that game in Pittsburgh. So we'll be talking a lot more hoops as the time goes on, as football and volleyball are winding down. And then we've got a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Weber State Weekly. You can become one of our patrons. Get into our game day chat on Slack, which is a good time. Got some folks in there chatting about the game as it happens. And sometimes those folks are at the game, especially on those road games. So Weber State, patreon.com/Weber State Weekly to check that out. Become a patron, support the work we do. All right, John King, let's talk about the Beehive Bowl, man, because this was one for the ages. I don't think anybody expected the Wildcats. I was confident that the Wildcats would win. I did not think that the Wildcats would come into this and lose. I thought that, basically all they've got to do is they're playing for pride at this point, right? Like the chances of getting into the playoffs are very, very poor. It's probably not going to happen. And so the one thing you've got is we don't lose to the Birds. And shoot, yeah, man, they did not lose to the Birds. I mean, initial reactions, John King, after kind of watching maybe even just the first quarter of that game, just being like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, this was kind of, I was thinking about this today when, I was thinking about the show. This was kind of a reward, I think, for an up and down season. I mean, obviously, the season's been a little bit disappointing if you're a Wildcat fan because, more than likely not going to be going to the playoffs this year. Had some really close calls, I mean, especially the Montana State game. That one really sticks out to me. Yeah. And there have been bright moments. I mean, the Eastern Washington moment is definitely the brightest moment of the season, but a lot of bad moments as well. And so, I've spoken about on this show many, many times about how much I've really enjoyed this game. And, I'm a newer Weber State fan than most because, I didn't move out to Utah until 2016. So, I really didn't know much other than Damian Lillard went to school there before that. And so, that this game has always had a special place, in my heart. And, I will not, one of my most lasting moments, and I've said this before, is when, Southern Utah knocked Stephen Cantwell out of the game in 2017. And, really, that injury right there totally prevented the Wildcats from, being one of the seeded teams in the playoffs that year. And then to turn around and go down and absolutely annihilate the T-Birds in Cedar City in the playoffs was one of my favorite, memories in all of sports. So with that being said, I really enjoyed the demolition that took place on Saturday. I like this rivalry a lot. We've talked a lot on the show about who is Weber State's true rival. I was hoping that over the years that this could become something. Now with Southern Utah off to the whack, we'll see what happens. Hopefully the series continues, but you never know, especially with how, conference scheduling is, working more and more these days. But I really, really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I think that you're right, John, especially maybe a little bit sad, I think, in some ways, that when Southern Utah announced that they would be going to the WAC, that their president sort of said, yeah, we don't really see, Weber doesn't see us as a rival the way that we see them. And that was sort of, disappointing words to hear, because I think for Weber State fans, like you said, John, who have been paying attention for the last, 5-6 years, it is a rivalry with the T-Birds. We always want to beat the T-Birds, and that game against the T-Birds in 2017 at Stewart Stadium, where Stephen Cantwell goes down in the second quarter and the Wildcats end up losing, that was sort of like a galvanizing moment in the rivalry, because the year before, the T-Birds had felt that the Wildcats got lucky and had won. I can't remember how many points they scored in the fourth quarter unanswered, and ended up winning by 1 or something like that in 2016. And then they come back and they say, okay, leave no doubt they're going to come up to Ogden, and they do win that game. And then there was a lot of talk the rest of the season, and especially leading up to that second round of the playoffs that year, that Southern Utah was the true champion, and that the Wildcats were carpetbaggers because of the shared championship and the same record. And then, like you said, John, Wildcats go down there and absolutely annihilate the Birds, and they haven't been the same since. It's been all Weber ever since. And even when the Wildcats have struggled, like in the spring, they still take care of business. And man, they took care of business on Saturday. And so when all they had to play for was pride, plenty of pride to go around, they really handled business. And I'd love to see it as well. So I want to talk now a little bit about some stats. I mean, there's a lot to like in this one, John. Obviously, when you beat a team 62-0 and they're your rival, that feels really, really good. So I thought that I would just kind of pick through and find certain stats that stuck out to me, and especially kind of the narrative that we have put out there, that has been out there all season, about Wildcats have struggled to get turnovers. Wildcats have not been able to win the turnover battle like they normally do in previous years, and that has caused problems, I think, in terms of flipping the field and giving them opportunities to score. Not the case in this one. T-Birds commit 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions by Justin Miller, who is, I think, a good quarterback, but just had a terrible game. No turnovers for the Wildcats. Why do you think, John King, that they were able to punish Justin Miller with 3 interceptions in a way that they hadn't really punished other quarterbacks in the Big Sky in all these previous games?
Well, I think it comes down to creating havoc in the backfield, which, if you look at the statistics from this game, I mean, two stats really stick out. I mean, I believe we had 9 tackles for losses, which was a huge number, and that just credit to the defensive line and the front 7 for being able to put that together. But then the other thing too is that you got 3 sacks to go along with that as well. And when you're getting home to the quarterback, I mean, that's something that's been I feel has been missing throughout this season. And I think that Weber State really reaped the benefits of unsettling the quarterback early, and then was able to force a couple of turnovers off of that. I mean, good things always happen when you're able to get in the backfield and disrupt the offense before it can really get going. And I definitely think Weber State, I definitely think that they saw the benefit of that throughout this game.
Yeah, because I mean, in addition to the 3 picks, there were 3 fumbles. One of those was lost by the T-Birds, but just causing problems, just getting hands on balls. And like you said, John, even though Justin Miller was only sacked once, and then his backup, Roy High product, Tyler Skidmore, was I think, sacked twice, which one of those was the last play of the game. Zeke Birch got to him and, brought him down for the last play of the game, essentially. But still, I think that you're right, that causing mayhem in the backfield, pressuring Justin Miller, getting him out of his rhythm, making him have to throw in windows that he necessarily didn't like, but was trying to get something going because the run game was just not happening for them. I have to check really quickly, but I think they only ran for,
50
oh man,
yards.
yeah, 55 yards. And so, or sorry, 15 yards. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, 15 yards, right? And so that's net. And so it's just like absolute disaster of a run game. And so all you have is to throw, and you've got the secondary who we've talked about all season as being very talented and very skilled out there waiting for opportunities, and they got them. They got opportunities to bring the ball down, and it just caused all kinds of problems. Because another thing to note is every single time that SUU turned the ball over, the Wildcats scored every time.
Well, we spoke a little bit about the front seven earlier, but I mean, that number, allowing 15 net rushing yards for an entire game. I mean, it doesn't matter who you're playing. That's an extremely, extremely, that's just a great performance. That's just a great performance all around. And so, when you're able to make a team that, that one dimensional and be like, okay, well, you can hand the ball off, because when you hand the ball off, we are absolutely dominating that phase of the game. Well, I mean, that makes things a lot easier when you only have to defend one portion of the offense, and that was definitely something that the T-Birds did not have the luxury of.
Yeah. A couple other things that stood out to me, John King, and I kind of wanted to get your take. You, on the opposite side of that, you talked about the fact that they were not, the T-Birds did not run the ball well at all against the Wildcat front seven. Like you said, netting only 15 yards. But on the reverse side, the Wildcats ran the ball extremely well, 220 yards on their side. It feels like when the Wildcats are able to run the ball, it's the secret to their success. When they're running the ball well, they win. It worked well against SUU. Other games where they hadn't been able to run the ball as well, like, I mean, to be frank, they didn't run the ball super well against Portland State. There was a lot of quarterback runs and packages for Creighton Cooper to run the ball, but in terms of the running backs running the ball that day, they really didn't, and the Wildcats lose that game. So it feels like this running is the secret to their success, and if they don't rush the ball, the Wildcats are in trouble of losing. Next week, Northern Colorado will be the final game of the season at Stewart Stadium, which has been not a great place for the Wildcats this season, surprisingly, after so many years of it being an absolute fortress, a difficult place to win. But Northern Colorado comes in ranked 9th in the conference for run defense. I mean, John, how do you take this? Do you think that the Wildcats continue this pattern and say, you know what, we're going to run the ball down their throats and it's going to open up the offense? We thought that they would do it against Portland State, but it wasn't the case. What's your take?
I do. I mean, I think that I think that the Wildcats will, get it done in the last game of the season. I mean, while we probably won't make the playoffs, it will be nice to have another winning record in, consecutive season. I think that'll be a really good, positive note, I guess you would say, to take into the off season. But you are 100% correct. I mean, and this honestly, this has been the case for a couple of years now. I mean, the Weber State offense has gone where the running game has gone, and when Weber State has had the ability to run the football with success, great things have opened up in the offense, and you've seen more explosive plays, and just because I feel like we want to be that run first style offensive team, and so when you rush for 260, if you would have told me before the game, sorry, 220, not 260, but if you would have told me before the game that Weber State was going to rush for 220 yards, well, then I would have said to you, all right, Colby, we're going to blow them out. Like, we're going to win by 5 or 6 scores. I didn't think it would be, 8 or 9 scores, but, I would have said that we were going to win pretty comfortably if you would have told me that we were going to rush for 220 yards before the game.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because I think about, in stark contrast to that, the main game in 2018, Wildcats not able to run the ball that day. Cold day in Ogden in December. And, then they're forced to throw the ball, and the main pass rush is pretty elite and just not able to get anything else going. And so I think you're right, John, that if the Wildcats are up there and they're running for 150 plus yards in a game, there's a very good chance that they win that game because, like you mentioned, it just opens up the field to so many other things. It makes the defense stay honest. They have to load the box to stop the run, opens up opportunities in the pass game. Guys can come across the middle without fear, and good things can happen. So I think that I would think that the Wildcats would do more of that against Northern Colorado over the next weekend on Saturday. I don't think that. I mean, right now, Northern Colorado is, it is the first year of head coach Ed McCaffrey. He's working through some things. They have the absolute worst defense or worst offense in the conference. And I just don't see them at 9 in the conference stopping the run. And so if it's a strength, hopefully the Wildcats will capitalize on that in ways that they haven't and finish the season strong with a dub. So now, John, I want to talk about talk a little bit more about the offense, because obviously it's the key factor here. Of course, the defense pitches a shutout, 62-0. That's something to be talked about. But the offense has been the struggle all season, and so I wanted to keep with that theme and talk about Rashid Shaheed, because he only had 3 catches, but 125 yards in those catches. They were some big plays along with a touchdown. It's almost a bummer to kind of see him kind of hit his stride for big plays toward the end of his senior season, and it feels like he's really starting to build some chemistry with freshman quarterback Bronson Barron. I mean, do you see it that way? Do you see like do you feel he is hitting his stride and starting to really be that contributor? Because we've heard it every week. Jay Hill wants to get the ball to Rashid Shaheed more. We're seeing it, and when he does get it, it's for big chunks of yardage. How do you feel about that kind of situation?
I think when we're looking back in 2 or 3 months and we're after the season ends and we look back and we say, okay, well, we reacted a certain way in the moment, but how do we react now? I think one thing that we're really gonna be disappointed in is that is I think that connection's coming a little bit too little too late. I mean, I would have really, I mean, the biggest what if I think of the season is going to be what would have happened to the season had Bronson Barron not been hurt.
Yeah.
I think that is something that I think Wildcat fans are. I think they're gonna. I mean, with basketball season starting and hopefully a good basketball season, I think there's going to be a distraction for a little while. But I think when we get to March, when we get to April, when people are starting to itch for football to come around again, I think that we're all going to think about that. And that's unfortunate, because anybody who's watched this team since he stepped foot on campus, I mean, Rashid Shaheed is not only one of the most electric players in the history of Weber State football, but he's one of the most electric players to watch in the country at any level. I mean, and it's going to be really it's going to be a very sad day. Like, I mean, he's going to play his last game next weekend, and that's going to be a tough day for Wildcat fans, because guys like him don't grow on trees. I mean, it's not like you just go out and there's 10 Rashid Shaheeds just sitting there waiting to be recruited. Okay, there's one, and we had him. And so, I think that's. I mean, it's a little bit disappointing that because I do think that they're kind of hitting their stride at this time, but that's because this is the most they've really gotten to play together, and so I think that that's going to be. I think this could be something when we look back on the football season here in a couple months. I think we're going to be like, man, I wish we just would have had a couple more weeks of that. I think we would have had something if we would have had just a couple more weeks of that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, John, because I mean, it's almost like the Stephen Cantwell thing, where once Cantwell gets the opportunity to start to throw the ball, really, a great player, had the vision to throw the ball and the arm to throw the ball down the field, but then also had the ability to make things happen with his legs. And we haven't seen quite that combo since 2017, sort of looking for a quarterback like that again. I haven't had him, and just disappointing that the time that the opportunity he gets to shine in that role now for Rashid Shaheed as the wide receiver with, almost like, I would say like not maybe the number one target, because down the field, those big chunks of yardage, he's the guy because of his speed and the ability to get behind the defense, starting to find the stride now with just one game remaining on the schedule because of the way that things have shook out. Just kind of a bummer overall. I think you're right. I want to talk a little bit about Bronson Barron now. And like you said, John, I think Barron has definitely been dealing with some injuries, maybe some stuff lingering from the spring, but also some getting banged up here in the fall season as well. A full off season, I think, will do him well. I don't think that him playing in the spring is a minus. I think that the opportunity to gain those reps made the difference for him. being a true freshman. But not yesterday, but Saturday, Barron comes in and throws for 225 yards on 13 of 18 passing and 3 touchdowns. He was only sacked once. I feel like the thing that he needs to work on, and I don't know really how you do this, but hopefully he continues to excel at this, is dealing with the pressure. Because it's clear to me that when he has the opportunity to work without the pressure in his face, he can be very good. We just saw it, 13 of 18, 3 touchdowns, 225 yards, and he didn't even play the whole game. They put Randall Johnson in, I think, late in the third quarter, and that was that. And so, John, I wanted to ask, do you feel that it's something that Barron will get better with time? How does a quarterback become cooler under pressure? Because I think it's what Barron needs. Because if he can get that, he can be elite.
Well, I think if I had the answer to that question, I think that I think I'd be a pretty hot commodity around the world because Bronson Barron's not the only quarterback in the country who sits there and says to themselves, "Man, if I just would have had a little more time, we would have been fine." I mean, that's pretty much every quarterback. It doesn't matter if you're playing on Saturdays, doesn't matter if you're playing on Sundays. Sheesh, it doesn't even matter if you're playing on Friday nights. So I think what we're going to look at over the course of this, because we've played back-to-back seasons now, and that's a lot of games. That's a lot of games over the course of the last calendar year.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and I think that one thing that it's one thing to get game experience, and I think game experience is irreplaceable, but the two things that I'd be looking for that I think are really going to help Bronson out are going to be, number one, he's going to get to go through a spring ball this year, and he's going to get to go through a real spring ball. Last year with the spring season where there was kind of a fall ball type thing that was going on, but I think getting back to a normal schedule is going to help him out a lot. And then and so much so, I really thought, and I think injuries really hampered Bronson's development over the course of the year, because I said at the beginning of the season, I said, I think we're really going to look back at the end of the season and say that, wow, the spring was huge for Bronson and really made all the difference. But unfortunately, injuries are part of the game, and that kind of got in the way a little bit of that development. But the two things I think that are going to help Bronson out the most are, A, he's going to get to go through spring practice, and B, he's going to be able to get healthy. I think that's got to be the biggest thing for him, is just, give him some time, away from the game, away from taking hits, and just get healthy. So when we roll this thing back, here next fall, he's going into next season, 100%, couldn't be feeling better. And with a better grasp of everything, because the longer you stick around, that's that's just gonna be better for him. So I think he's gonna have a really good off season. But I think that those two things are gonna be, he's got a lot of game experience, but he's going to be able to get some different kinds of experience this off season.
Yeah, because looking through the schedule in the fall, it's going to be another tough schedule next year. Wildcats will have to take on JMU on the road at in Harrisonburg, and then another gauntlet of Big Sky teams on the schedule. And so it's not going to be an easy one in the fall of 2022. And so I think you're right. I think that the time away will help the Wildcats get healthy. There is a lot of veteran leadership on the defense that they will be losing, and so the defense could look very different. And a lot of guys are going to have to step up, because I was looking through the list of seniors this afternoon. They will be losing Jared Sheese. They will be losing Sherwin Lavaca. They will be losing a lot of guys that have really anchored that defense, and it's gonna make a big difference. So we'll see how that pans out. But I think you're right. That little time away, a true off season, time to get healthy, time to stick around, study some film, get ready, all for the better for the Wildcats, for especially that young offense, because there are a lot of young guys there. One last thing though, while we're talking about seniors, back to Rashid Shaheed, the T-Birds largely kicked away from Shaheed. I don't know, John, what do you think? Is he going to get a chance to break that NCAA record? Because he's only got one more game.
I think he's going to get one shot, and if I think they'll kick to him maybe one time, whether that'll be, I don't know when that's going to be, but I think he's going to get one shot at it, and whether he is able to take it or whether that works out, but you know, it's been with the offensive struggles over the course of the year, one of the biggest consistent, things, especially over the last couple of years, on the offensive side of the ball, if you consider this offense, have been Rashid Shaheed's kick returns.
Yeah.
And so, kicking away from him or not giving him the ability to do that, I mean, that does take a decent amount away from, how Weber State gets good field position. And so I think he'll get one shot at it. And I really hope that he, can make the most of it, because I think it'd be a really awesome record to break. But I do think he will get one chance. I don't think he'll get any more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of on the bright side of this situation is obviously anybody who's a fan of the Weber State Wildcats, and maybe some people who aren't, they want to see Rashid Shaheed break the record. He's a good kid, class act. I mean, they want to see him get a chance to break the record. But on the flip side, a lot of these kicks, away from Rashid Shaheed have gone to Hayes Hadley. And I think that there's an opportunity for him to kind of get a few more reps here in this season and start to, get comfortable with being what Rashid Shaheed has been for the Wildcats for the last 5 years, right? He has been a weapon, and giving Hayes Hadley the opportunity to kind of see that in person and get some of those reps while Shaheed is on the field and take some of that special teams coaching from a veteran leader like himself, man, I mean, that's worth something. So I guess it can't be all bad, the fact that he hasn't broken the record yet. I mean, he's tied right now. That's not nothing. But good opportunity for Hayes Hadley to kind of see how it's done. And one more shot, like you said, I think you're right. He'll probably get one more shot to break the record, because if he starts getting chunks of yardage, they're going to stop kicking him and say, nope, we ain't doing that anymore. John, last thing I wanted to talk about were a couple of guys that haven't gotten their name called a lot on this podcast, but I wanted to shout out because we talked about the run game, and this year the run game has been, like we said, a key to success for the Wildcats. And so 2 seniors that we wanted to talk a little bit about, Dave Jones and Clay Moss. They'll be playing their last games as Weber State Wildcats tomorrow, or not tomorrow, this weekend. And man, they got a lot of work. I mean, who do you think takes their place in those situations? Because Clay Moss, fullback, guy who can come through and block. I mean, looking at the roster as it's constructed now, who's going to take the place of a Dave Jones or a Clay Moss?
Honestly, no idea.
Yeah,
Just
it's
because,
tough.
I think that's a tough question. I mean, I think you look at this game, and this was truly a running back by committee, game. I mean, Dave Jones led the backfield with with 14 touches, but then no one else had more than 6. And I just kind of think that that's a way that that football's kind of going, is that you have a stable of 3 or 4 guys, and other than I don't think that there's going to. I think when we look at the team, the roster next year, I think we're gonna and we look through those first couple box scores, I think that you're going to see more of a running back by committee approach. And I said going into the season that I thought this was our most talented group. I still think that there's a lot of talent in that room.
For sure.
And so I just I don't know who's going to replace Dave Jones and Clay Moss. To be honest, I'll be that would be something that will definitely be a storyline though going in to next season, is how the running back touches are handled. Like, I do think that's going to be I think that's going to be one of the biggest early season storylines. Like when we start, our preview and our prep for next year's season, I think that's going to be, because that's good. I mean, as we said earlier, that controls so much of this offense. I mean, being able to consistently run the football and find success on the ground, like it's a big deal to Weber State. And so, I think that's going to be a big time storyline that we're looking at, is how those touches are going to be handled moving forward.
Yeah. You noted that SUU is going to be making the move to the WAC after the season. I don't know, John. Does the Beehive Bowl survive? Because it's been fun. I mean, obviously, we've been on the winning side of a lot of games against the T-Birds, but it's a game that both sides get up for. I don't know. Does it survive with conference realignment? What do you think?
I hope so. And, I think I've said this before on the podcast. If I haven't said it before on the podcast, I went to Syracuse University. That's my alma mater for undergrad. And one of the toughest things, and if you're a college basketball fan, how big of a game the Syracuse Georgetown game is. And Syracuse and Georgetown didn't play for 4 years after Syracuse left the Big East. And if you would have said that to alumni at the time, they would have said you're crazy, because they would have been like, that's one of the biggest games of the college basketball season, and you're just going to stop playing it. And that's just how conference realignment has, change things up. And so I love this game. Like, I think it has potential, and I think it has had potential to become a really, really good rivalry game. And I think that Southern Utah is the most, when we've had that conversation, who is Weber State's rival? I think that Southern Utah is, could be that main rival. And so I hope that, the athletic directors are able to get together and, are able to make the scheduling work somehow, in order to, it probably won't be every year, but, every couple, maybe every other, I don't know. Because I would like to see it survive. But I will say, I do think that with the trends in college football of scheduling more conference games and, really taking away the non-conference schedule, like, that's something that will worry me over the next couple of years, because, Weber State, we want, and we're going to want to schedule in the limited non-conference games we can schedule. We're going to want to schedule resume builders, and is Southern Utah always going to be a resume builder? Well, I don't have the answer to that question, but I really do hope that this game makes it through the conference realignment.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a history of rivalry games living beyond conference realignment. We see it with Florida and Florida State. They still play each other every year on rivalry weekend. Even within the state, we've seen Brigham Young and Utah continue to figure out a way to make it work. Not every year, but most years it still happens, and likely to continue. So I agree with you, John. I think hopefully the ADs find a way to make this game continue. I personally think we need a better trophy. There's no trophy for this game, which I think is part of this, right? Like, it's why it's so maybe easy for it to go away. Because if you've got a trophy, like I look at some of the old Big Sky rivalries like Montana, Idaho, and of course we've got Cat Grizz coming up this weekend, Brawl of the Wild. If you've seen that trophy, I mean, that thing is massive. Like, guys got to hold it on their shoulder. It's just crazy big. But I think that that's maybe a part of this too, is that this thing needs a trophy. And if it's going to survive, because like, think about this. SUU NAU has a trophy. They have a trophy, but we don't. The Beehive Bowl doesn't have a trophy. That's crazy. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And so,
and I guess one additional point I wanted to make is, is that, maybe this is something that, the state legislators can help us out with a little bit, because, and we laugh about that, but in other states, there are mandates, from state government that, you got to schedule these teams, every so often, the local teams, and as local as Cedar City can be to Ogden, but, the in-state teams. And so, maybe that provides us with a little bit of avenue, to keep the game going. But I really hope the athletic directors can get together and make it work.
I would say that my one worry about the Beehive Bowl right now is Dixie State. Well, now Utah Tech, because
I was going to say correction.
Yeah. Utah Tech is a program that is on the rise. There's investment there. They obviously have their schedule is one of the toughest in this country this year. Their schedule is just absolutely brutal and nuts. They played some of the toughest teams in the country in both the WAC and the Big Sky and beyond, and just got absolutely throttled by everybody almost. And they just kept on chugging. You know what I mean? And so my worry is that as Utah Tech challenges itself and tries to schedule those tough games and becomes something maybe more than what is in Cedar City right now, that the appeal of scheduling a Southern Utah diminishes when you've got another school, when we talk about resume builders and out of conference schedule, who could be a better pick for you when you're making the case to an FCS committee to say, yes, we should be in the playoff. I guess that's one of my biggest concerns is that Utah Tech will begin to overshadow SUU as a rival. And that's fine, I think, if there's a rivalry that buds. But right now, with the history the way it is, would love to see the game continue with SUU.
Definitely.
All right, man. We said a lot of words about the final Beehive Bowl for the foreseeable future. We don't know anything about that. Hopefully, like we said, that changes. But now we're going to move on to Factor Whack. All right, John King, I've got I guess I got some statements for you, and you're going to have to tell me whether this is fact or whack. So, first one up I've got for you, SUU quarterbacks combined, because both Justin Miller and Tyler Skidmore took reps in the game on Saturday. They combined for a 50% completion percentage. Is that fact or is that whack?
I'm going to say that's fact because that was one of the things that I looked up in the box score right before we got on the show. So I'm going to say fact.
And he is correct. It is fact. They combined for just 50%, 10 of 20. Justin Miller, 8 of 17. And then Tyler Skidmore, 2 of 3. So a little bit more success on his side and obviously no turnovers. All right, now to the next one. Rashid Shaheed had more return yards than Hayes Hadley. Is that fact or is that whack?
I'm going to say that that's whack, just because of what you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about Hayes and Rashid. I want to say it's whack.
It actually is whack. I was trying to trip you up because it was like, what? There's no way. But like you said, in the conversation we just had, they largely kicked away from Rashid Shaheed. So the returns, all returns, both had 2 opportunities. And Hayes Hadley ended up netting 48 yards. He had a long of 40. Rashid Shaheed only 20 yards with a long of 14. So they were ready for him when they did kick to him. So, yep, you are absolutely correct. It is whack. I got another one. Kyle Thompson, freshman kicker for the Wildcats. He went 8 for 8 on extra points. Is that fact or is that whack?
I think that's whack because I don't think he kicked the last one.
Oh, John King's too good, man. You're absolutely right. He didn't kick the last one. Riley Moore did. So he was actually 7 for 7. And then Riley Moore is 1 for 1 with the final extra point, making it 8 for 8. Man, John King, you're too good, man.
On fire. And Fuego.
And Fuego right now. Okay. Next one. Ty Whitworth had a solo tackle. Is that fact or is that whack?
I'm going to say that's whack.
Okay, because obviously Ty Whitworth, All-American offensive lineman. Yeah. What is he doing getting a solo tackle? It's actually fact. I don't know how, and I would have to go back and look through the game.
I was going to say, I don't remember that from watching the game.
Yeah, but if you go through the stat sheet, yeah, he's got a solo tackle all by himself. Look at that. I was surprised. Had to throw it in fact or whack. All right, man. This is the last one, and this one took a little digging. It's not going to come from the stat sheet, but it's going to come from the history between these two teams. Weber State has lost more Beehive Bowls in Ogden than in Cedar City. Is that fact or is that whack?
So I'm going to say that's fact because I remember somebody saying to me at some point that, like, because there were so many years that went back and forth where we would win in Cedar City and then they would win in Ogden. And so because of that, I'm going to say that is fact.
Man, John King, too good. It's fact, man. The Wildcats have lost 6 Beehive Bowls in Ogden. They've only lost 2 in Cedar City. So, man, John King, two good. What'd you go on there? Let's 1, 2, 3,
4 for 5.
4 for 5, man. My goodness. Sign this man to a 10-year contract.
80% on a two choice multiple choice exam. Not that impressive.
Honorary degree from Weber State Weekly. That's for dang sure.
That's right.
All right, man. So like we noted, just one upcoming event for the football season before it wraps up this year. We'll be playing Northern Colorado at Stewart Stadium this Saturday, November 20th for the final game. It will be senior day, and so there will be a lot of fanfare, of course, with that. A lot of team family members will be there. And so this is your last chance, folks. You want to go see the Wildcats play one more time before the snow falls? This is it. We'll be taking on Northern Colorado, 1 p.m. at Stewart Stadium. So if the game is at 1 p.m., that means be up there to tailgate by 11. A lot of folks are up there earlier, but get up there at 11, start tailgating, you'll have a good time. You can get the game on ESPN Plus or 103.1 The Wave. Listen to Steve Klauke there. Be the last chance to listen to him this season. And then he'll be moving over to hoops. So, John, we'll wrap up the show like we usually do. WeberStateWeekly@gmail.com if you want to email us. Facebook.com/WeberStateWeekly, on Instagram and Twitter as well, @WeberStateWeekly. Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/WeberStateWeekly to support our work. And we got a blog, WeberStateWeekly.com. Go check it out. I've got a bunch of interviews with recruits coming up because we just had signing day. If you noticed, signing day for soccer and volleyball and I think softball has a bunch of recruits right now as well. And so we'll be interviewing. Oh, and there's also a hoops recruit out of Las Vegas that we want to get an interview with. So a bunch of upcoming content on the website with all of these new recruits, new Wildcats coming on soon. Check that out. WeberStateWeekly.com. We'll be posting it on social media as we get through it. Yeah, so be looking forward to that. All right, John King, want to thank you so much, man, for taking some time to chat with me about Weber State football. We'll be probably having one more game day show with Coach Tom Stackeruk. We'll see that game on Saturday, or that game day show will be up on Saturday. And then we'll have one more football episode for you folks to wrap up the season on Monday night. So, John, I'll wrap it up like I usually do. Weber State, Weber State.
Great.
Go Wildcats.